would, sooner or later, go back to the nations from which they had come. The men and women profiled in this book came to India for the duration. They exchanged their old homeland for their new one unreservedly and unequivocally. Once in India, they knew they would almost certainly die in India too. The foreigners who fought in Spain stayed for the most part within their racial and religious boundaries, whereas the freedom fighters of my narrative turned their back on their compatriots to identify with people who were neither Christian nor white. They did so for what should certainly have been the cause of all advanced and progressive mankind, namely the ending of European imperialism and the liberation of colonized people. One of the battalions in the International Brigade was named for Abraham Lincoln. Its members were all Americans. Yet, as the very name of the Lincoln Battalion suggests, for these fighters, identification with the Republican cause in Spain did not mean a disavowal of their own country, but rather an affirmation of its noblest values. Abraham Lincoln was an American president who stood forthrightly for democracy and justice at home. These compatriots who invoked his name would struggle for democracy and justice abroad. To keep at bay the fascists, to save Spain from the awful fate that had befallen both Italy and Germany, was therefore an act of transnational solidarity through which universal values could be pursued regardless of an individual's background or theatre of enactment. In the same manner, by coming out to India, the renegades of this book were not necessarily rejecting their land of origin. British fighters for India's freedom were upholding the dissident culture within Britain itself, which urged them to be identified with the underdog. By doing what they did in India, for India, they were calling their British compatriots to their better selves. And the Americans in my story saw themselves as acting in the anti-imperialist tradition of their homeland. Like the foreign radicals in 1930s Spain, these foreign radicals in colonial India were not being disloyal to the nation of their birth. Rather, they saw in another nation the possibility of pursuing social and political ideals that make human life more appealing everywhere. If imperialism was immoral and unjust, then ending it was in the interest of the colonizer as well as the colonized. If women sought equal rights in Britain or America, then surely they should get equal rights in India too. The 30,000-odd foreigners who came to Spain in the 1930s left behind memories, warm and affectionate memories, no doubt. However, they did not have any tangible influence on the history of the country whose cause they briefly made their own. The Civil War was lost by the Republican side they fought for. On the other hand, the 7 individuals featured in this book did much more than bravely take a stand for Indian freedom. Through their work and through their writings, they contributed enormously to public debate within India. They challenged Indians to pay closer attention to the fault lines of class and gender that preceded the coming of the British and which would, if left unattended, persist after the British left. They offered fresh, arresting insights into how a free India could best promote economic development, equal access to education, and, most far-sightedly, environmental sustainability. The lives of these white-skinned heroes and heroines of India's past may yet be relevant for India's future. And, since the ideals they strove for were universal rather than parochial, for the future of the world too. In December 1945, Mahatma Gandhi met with a group of British Quakers in Calcutta. Animated by ideals of peace and brotherhood, these social workers had come to aid the victims of the Bengal famine. The Second World War had just ended. There was a rising tide of nationalist aspirations awaiting fulfillment. One Quaker asked whether it was better if non-official Englishmen stayed away from India for the time being. Gandhi answered, "Any friend who is a real friend and who comes in a spirit of service, not as a superior, is bound to be welcome." He gave the example of the Anglican priest Charles Freer Andrews.